Have you ever worked the night shift? The kind where the silence is so deep you can hear your own heartbeat? For morticians, that silence is often shared with those who have passed, but sometimes they aren't as silent as you'd think. This is the story of the man they called the Watcher. It was a Tuesday night when he arrived at the morgue. An elderly man, found in his home, seemingly passed peacefully in his sleep. Everything was routine until the initial preparations began. His eyes were open, not unusual. The mortician, a seasoned professional named Arthur, gently closed them. He turned to grab a form, and when he looked back, the man's pale blue eyes were wide open again. Arthur frowned. Rigor mortis can do strange things. He carefully closed the eyelids once more, holding them for a moment. They stayed shut. Satisfied, he continued his work, cataloging the few personal effects the man had with him. A worn-out wallet, a single, old-fashioned key, and a faded photograph of a lighthouse. Nothing out of the ordinary. As he was about to move the body to the cold storage, a flicker in his peripheral vision made him freeze. The man's eyes were open, and this time, Arthur felt a chill that had nothing to do with the room's temperature. It felt like they were looking right at him. He documented the anomaly, attributing it to post-mortem spasms, though a knot of unease was tightening in his stomach. He forced the eyelids closed a third time, this time applying a bit of mortician's wax to ensure they stayed shut. He wheeled the gurney into the refrigerated unit, locked the heavy door, and tried to put it out of his mind. The rest of the night was quiet. Too quiet. The next day, Arthur's colleague, a younger mortician named Clara, was on duty. Arthur mentioned the strange incident with the eyes, half joking about it. Clara laughed it off. "Old man Hemlock playing tricks from the other side, huh?" she quipped. They both knew the stresses of the job could play on the mind. That night, Clara had to retrieve a different body from the storage unit. She pulled open the heavy, cold door, and the first thing she saw was the gurney from the previous night. And on it, the old man. His eyes were wide open, the mortician's wax having failed completely. They seemed to glow faintly in the dim light of the storage unit. Clara's breath caught in her throat. She quickly grabbed the gurney she needed, slammed the door shut, and hurried back to the prep room, her heart hammering against her ribs. Throughout her shift, she felt a constant, unnerving sensation of being watched. Every shadow seemed to move. Every creak of the old building sounded like a footstep. She'd glance over her shoulder, expecting to see someone, but there was never anyone there. She tried to focus on her work, but her eyes kept darting towards the sealed door of the cold storage. It was as if she could feel his gaze piercing right through the metal. When Arthur came in the next morning, he found Clara looking exhausted, her face pale. "You were right," she said, her voice barely a whisper. "The eyes. They were open, and I think he was watching me. All night." Now they were both unnerved. This went beyond typical post-mortem occurrences. They decided to perform the embalming process together, hoping to resolve the issue once and for all. They brought the man's body back into the prep room. His eyes, as expected, were wide open, fixed on the ceiling. They worked meticulously. During the process, they used eye caps, small plastic devices designed specifically to keep the eyes of the deceased closed. They were a standard, surefire tool. With the eye caps in place and the procedure complete, the man's face finally looked at peace. Arthur and Clara both breathed a sigh of relief. The family was scheduled to come for a viewing in 2 days. The problem, they believed, was solved. That night, it was Arthur's shift again. The silence of the morgue felt heavier than ever. He tried to keep himself busy with paperwork, but his mind kept wandering back to the old man. Just before midnight, he decided to do one last check, just for his own peace of mind. He walked to the cold storage, his footsteps echoing in the empty hall. He took a deep breath, unlocked the door, and pulled it open. His blood ran cold. The old man was lying on the gurney, his head slightly turned, and his eyes were open, the plastic eye caps lying on the table beside him. This was impossible. Absolutely impossible. But the most terrifying part? The eyes were no longer staring at the ceiling. They were aimed directly at the door, directly at Arthur. He slammed the door shut, his hands trembling. He stumbled back to his office, his mind reeling. This wasn't science. This wasn't biology. This was something else. He sat at his desk, staring at the security monitor, his eyes glued to the camera feed showing the hallway outside the cold storage. At the stroke of midnight, the camera feed flickered. For a split second, the image distorted, and then it returned to normal. But something was different. A deep, long shadow now stretched from under the cold storage door, a shadow that wasn't there before. It seemed to pulse, to writhe, like something alive. Arthur didn't move. He couldn't. He just sat there, paralyzed, as the shadow slowly, inch by inch, began to creep across the floor towards his office. He could feel the temperature in the room drop, could see his breath misting in the air. The feeling of being watched was now an oppressive, physical weight. He knew, with a certainty that defied all logic, that the old man was no longer in the drawer. He was out, and he was coming for him. The shadow reached his doorway. The doorknob began to rattle, softly at first, then more violently. Arthur was trapped. He could hear a faint, dry whisper, like dead leaves scraping against pavement, seeping into the room. He couldn't make out the words, but he understood the intent. He was being hunted. What happened next, Arthur can't fully explain. He remembers a blinding flash of light from the hallway, the sound of splintering wood, and then nothing. He woke up on the floor of his office, the morning sun streaming through the window. The door to his office was hanging off its hinges. In the hallway, the heavy door to the cold storage was wide open. He cautiously approached it and peered inside. The gurney was empty. The old man was gone. Vanished. The only thing left was the single, old-fashioned key lying in the center of the cold metal slab. A key to a lighthouse. Arthur quit his job that day. Clara left a week later. The morgue hired new staff, but the legend of the Watcher became a whispered tale, a warning to anyone working the night shift. They say that sometimes, on a quiet night, you can still feel it, that cold, unnerving gaze from the shadows. And some say that if you're a night shift worker in any lonely profession, you should never turn your back on the darkness, because you never know whose eyes might just open and decide to follow you home. Thanks so much for watching this story unfold. If you enjoy tales that explore the unexplained and a little bit of the spooky, be sure to hit that like button. And don't forget to subscribe and turn on notifications so you won't miss our next journey into the unknown. Stay safe and always check the shadows.